Welcome to Pillowtime lore, where dreams take shape and stories wrap around you like your favorite blanket. You've made it through the day, and now it's time to slow down, breathe deeply, and drift into a world made just for you. So, fluff up your pillow, snuggle into your coziest spot, and let your eyes get heavier with each word. This is your moment. No to-do lists, no noise, just stillness and a little magic. With each breath in, feel the tension melt from your shoulders. With each breath out, let go of everything that doesn't serve your peace. You're safe here. Tonight's story is soft and soothing, like a warm cup of tea for your thoughts, carefully crafted to calm your busy mind and help you drift gently into sleep. So close your eyes, dear dreamer. Let your imagination wander while I carry you into a land where anything is possible and everything ends in peace. This is Pillowtime lore. It was one of those nights when Ayaan's eyelids felt heavier than his backpack. The library had closed hours ago, but he was still there, buried in notes, chasing deadlines. By the time he finally walked out into the cool night air, the streets were almost empty. The streetlights flickered like they were tired, too. He glanced at his watch. 11:45 p.m. His bus was supposed to leave at 11:50. Ayaan's pace quickened, sneakers tapping against the pavement. But just as he turned the corner, his heart sank. The bus hissed, the doors shut, and with a deep growl of the engine, it rolled away, leaving behind a faint trail of smoke and Ayaan's crushed hopes. Perfect, just perfect, he muttered, throwing his hands in the air. The street grew quieter. No rickshaws, no cars, no sign of another bus. That's when he noticed something unusual. At the far end of the street, half hidden in shadows, stood an old train platform. He had passed this road 100 times, but never noticed it before. A rusted sign hung crookedly. Midnight train. Ayaan frowned. Since when do we even have a train station here? Almost as if answering him, a loud whistle echoed through the night. The ground trembled slightly, and out of the darkness rolled a an old, black iron machine that looked like it belonged in another century. Its windows glowed, dim yellow, and steam curled around it like mist. The doors creaked open with a long, groaning sound. No one stepped out. No one seemed to be inside either. Ayaan hesitated. Everything about it screamed wrong. But then again, what other choice did he have? Taking a deep breath, he tightened his grip on his bag and stepped onto the midnight train. As soon as Ayaan stepped onto the midnight train, he froze. The air inside felt colder than outside, carrying a faint smell of iron and damp wood. The dim yellow bulbs overhead flickered, making the long corridor of seats look like a scene from an old horror movie. At first glance, the train looked empty, relieved. Ayaan slid into a corner seat and sighed. But as the train groaned and started moving, he realized he wasn't alone. A few seats ahead sat a man in a dark overcoat He held a suitcase tightly on his lap every time the train rattled. The suitcase rattled too, like something inside was moving on its own. Ayaan tried not to stare, but his curiosity gnawed at him across the aisle. A woman sat perfectly still. Her black hair fell neatly over her shoulders, her hands folded in her lap. She was facing straight ahead, eyes wide open, unblinking. Minutes passed, the train shook, the lights flickered dead still. Not once did she blink. Ayaan's throat went dry. Then, from the back of the coach, came a soft sound, humming. Sweet, low, and oddly soothing. Ayaan turned his head and spotted a little girl in a white frock swinging her legs, humming a lullaby. She looked far too young to be traveling alone at midnight. A chill ran down Ayaan's spine. The man with the rattling suitcase, the woman who never blinked, the girl who hummed lullabies. 3 passengers, all strange in their own way, and all staring straight ahead, as if waiting for something. Ayaan swallowed hard and whispered to himself, "What kind of train did I just get on?" The train rattled on, its wheels clanking like a heartbeat echoing through the night. Ayaan leaned back, trying to convince himself this was just a normal late-night train, nothing unusual, but his nerves said otherwise. Then came the sound of polished shoes clicking against the wooden floor, tap, tap, tap. Ayaan looked up. A tall man in a neat black uniform was walking down the aisle. He wore a cap pulled low, and in his gloved hand he held a puncher for tickets. "Tickets, please," the man said in a steady, deep voice. Relieved, Ayaan almost laughed. Finally, someone normal. He quickly pulled out his bus pass, then paused. Of course, it wasn't valid here. Before he could explain, the collector took one glance at him, nodded, and moved on. The man stopped in front of the passenger with the rattling suitcase. Without a word, the passenger handed over a yellowed slip of paper. Click, the collector punched it. Next, he walked to the woman with the unblinking eyes. She silently raised her hand, with a ticket already between her fingers. Click, the little girl hummed louder when the collector came near. But he didn't scold her. Instead, she slipped him a tiny folded card, and he punched it without question. Ayaan frowned. Nobody else spoke. Nobody asked where the train was going. It was like they had all done this before. The collector continued down the aisle, shoes tapping steadily. Until mid-step he simply wasn't there anymore. No puff of smoke, no sound, no trace. 1 second walking, the next gone. Ayaan's breath caught in his throat. He looked around in shock, but the others didn't even flinch. The suitcase man stared ahead. The woman still didn't blink. The little girl kept humming. Ayaan whispered, "Did no one just see that?" But the midnight train rattled on, indifferent. Ayaan had just begun to calm his racing heart after the vanishing ticket collector, when the train screeched and slowed. He leaned forward, expecting the familiar glow of a busier station, but outside, only darkness stretched for miles. The train stopped. Silence. Absolute silence. no chatter, no distant cars, no streetlights, just mist curling around the tracks. Ayaan's stomach knotted. The door slid open with a hiss. A chill wind swept through the carriage. He noticed the man with the rattling suitcase stand up. Without a word, he stepped off. The suitcase clanged against the platform, but the man didn't look back. He just disappeared into the mist. Ayaan blinked. Nobody else reacted. The woman with the unblinking eyes remained seated, staring straight ahead. The little girl kept humming, her soft voice bouncing off the walls of the empty carriage. The train lurched again, moving forward, only to stop at another platform. A few minutes later, this one was even stranger. Crumbling old station, with broken benches and graffiti that seemed to shift when Ayaan looked at it. Another passenger left. Again, not a word, not a glance, just gone. Ayaan's heart pounded. Where are we even going? He muttered under his breath. Each stop grew more unsettling. Empty roads, dead forests, abandoned factories, places no train should ever reach. And with each stop, one passenger left quietly, blending into the shadows. Ayaan clutched his bag tighter. He realized he was the only one left who seemed truly out of place. The only one whose mind raced with questions. The midnight train didn't take ordinary routes, and he had no idea where it would stop next. The train had been moving for what felt like hours. Ayaan's eyelids grew heavy. The rocking of the car and the soft hum of the engine lulling him toward sleep. He wanted to rest, but something in the air made him uneasy. Then he heard a faint, sibilant sound. At first, he thought it was the wind rattling the windows, but as he focused, the whispers became clearer. "Don't fall asleep." Ayaan jolted upright, eyes wide. His heart pounded in his chest. The voice seemed to come from the walls themselves, vibrating through the metal and wood. He looked around. The other passengers, rattling suitcase man, unblinking woman, humming girl, remained completely still. As if oblivious to the warnings, he pressed his ear to the wall. The whisper continued, soft but urgent. "Wake. Stay awake. Danger." Ayaan's mind raced. Was this the train playing tricks on him, or something else? He glanced out the dark windows. Shadows flitted past, too fast to be trees. Shapes twisted and shifted along the tracks, disappearing whenever he blinked. Every time he tried to focus on one shadow, the whisper grew louder. "Do not sleep." Panic clawed at him. He forced himself to sit upright, gripping his bag tightly, trying not to listen too closely, yet unable to look away. The little girl's humming stopped for a moment, replaced by a soft giggle, almost as if she knew the whispers and found them amusing. The train rattled on, deeper into darkness. Ayaan realized, with a sinking feeling, sleep could be deadly. Here, and whatever haunted this train, it was patient, waiting for anyone who dared close their eyes. Ayaan forced himself to stay awake, every nerve screaming, every shadow a threat, every whisper a reminder that the midnight train had its own rules and he was trapped in them. Ayaan blinked, trying to shake off the exhaustion, but when he looked out the window, dread washed over him. The train was running through the same dark tunnel again, the flickering lights bouncing off the wet walls, just like before. His stomach churned. He wasn't moving forward. He was trapped in a loop. He glanced around. The little girl still hummed her eerie lullaby, her eyes fixed on the floor. The woman with unblinking eyes stared straight ahead, her head tilted the same way it had before. Every detail repeated perfectly, yet subtly wrong. A shadow flickered. Behind the woman, a shadow that hadn't been there in the first loop. Ayaan gripped his seat. This isn't real, he whispered. He tried speaking to them. Are you aware of this? But the woman didn't respond, and the girl's humming twisted into words he couldn't understand. The tunnel walls seemed to ripple like liquid metal, reflecting distorted shapes that disappeared when he looked directly. The whispers from the train walls returned. Louder now. Don't fall asleep. Don't lose yourself. Every repetition twisted reality a little more. The train doors slammed open by themselves, only to close again moments later. The lights flickered, shadows darted, and the same passengers moved in ways that weren't possible. Ayaan's mind raced. He was caught in a loop that wasn't just time, but something alive, watching him, testing him. He clenched his fists. Sleep was dangerous. Panic was dangerous. The midnight train was no ordinary ride. It was a place where reality bent, and he had to survive the loop long enough to find a way out. Ayaan's heart raced as the little girl stopped humming. Her tiny head lifted, and for the first time, her eyes met his. They were too old to knowing. For a child, her voice was soft, almost like the whispering walls themselves. You must not sleep, she said, her words slow, deliberate. Everyone who falls asleep on this train never wakes up again. Ayaan froze. His mind stumbled over the words. What do you mean? Never wakes up. The girl's lips curled faintly. They think it's just a long ride. But the train, it feeds on dreams. It traps souls. And time. Time doesn't move for it. Only for the train. A shiver ran down Ayaan's spine. He looked around at the unblinking woman, whose gaze seemed sharper now, as if listening. The walls murmured again. Stay awake. Survive. Why? Why are you here? He asked, his voice trembling. Why do you know this? I've been here before, she whispered. I should have left long ago, but the train, it let some speak, to warn the others. You are not like them yet, but if you sleep, it will be too late. Ayaan swallowed hard. His eyelids felt heavy, the exhaustion from the looping tunnels threatening to drag him under. He clenched his fists. He had to stay awake. He had to find a way out before the train claimed him to. The girl's hand brushed his arm, warm but fleeting. Watch the doors. Watch the walls. Don't trust what you see. And never close your eyes. As the train rumbled onward, the shadows shifted more violently, and Ayaan realized the little girl's lullaby wasn't just a song, it was a warning. a key, and maybe the only way to survive the midnight train. Ayaan fumbled for his phone, desperate to call his family, but the screen blinked, empty, no signal, no bars, nothing. A cold panic crawled up his spine. The midnight train wasn't just outside the world, it was erasing his connection to it. He looked out the window, hoping for a glimpse of the familiar city lights, but the glass reflected only darkness, and then something else. His own reflection stared back, older, worn, haunted. His hair had streaks of gray, lines etched deep on his forehead, eyes hollow and tired. He blinked. The reflection blinked slower, almost mocking him. What is happening?" Ayaan whispered. The unblinking woman shifted in her seat, and the little girl's lullaby echoed softly, almost like a chant. "Now, time doesn't flow here the way you think," the girl said. "It ages you, even if you don't move, and the train, it doesn't forgive mistakes." Every attempt to grasp reality failed. The walls flickered, showing fragments of memories: his childhood home, his parents' laughter, but twisted, distorted, wrong. Even his hands in his lap seemed alien. He tried to shake the reflection off, but it clung, staring deeper than his own eyes could. Ayaan's pulse raced. If the train could twist his reflection, what else could it change? He realized that every second counted. Falling asleep was fatal. Time looping was terrifying. And now, reality itself was slipping from his grasp. He gripped the edge of his seat, trying to anchor himself. "I have to get out. I have to fight it," he muttered. But the whispering walls seemed to smile, and the little girl's lullaby reminded him softly, chillingly, "Watch closely, Ayaan, or you'll become part of the train forever." The midnight train roared onward, carrying him not just through tunnels, but through a reality bending toward madness. The train jolted, and something heavy clattered to the floor. Ayaan looked down and froze. It was the rattling suitcase, lying open, abandoned. The suitcase man had disappeared at one of the Eerie stops, but somehow his luggage had fallen from a hidden compartment, spilling its secrets. Cautiously, Ayaan knelt beside it. Inside were dozens of clocks, all stopped at exactly midnight. Their hands twitched now and then, as if struggling to move, rattling softly like whispered warnings. The faint tick-tick-tick sound seemed alive, almost like the heartbeat of the train itself. What is this?" Ayaan whispered. A chill crawling up his spine, the little girl appeared beside him. Eyes wide, "They are trapped," she said quietly. "The train takes time. It freezes it, holds it here. The clocks are the proof. Every soul it traps leaves a mark, even on something as small as a clock hand. That rattling, it's their struggle." Ayaan stared in disbelief as the hands twitched again, faster this time, almost frantic. "So, all the people who vanish," he asked, "they're stuck, like the clocks?" The girl nodded. "Exactly. And the train? It wants new time to trap. It wants you." Ayaan's mind raced. If the train could stop time itself, escape seemed impossible. He glanced at his reflection in the window. It still showed the older, haunted version of himself. The walls whispered, louder this time. Don't let it catch you. Don't sleep. Don't give in. He took a deep breath and slammed the suitcase shut, almost feeling the weight of frozen time lift slightly. The rattling stopped, but the warning remained. The midnight train wasn't just a ride, it was a prison of moments, a snatcher of souls. And now, he had to find the door before it claimed him to. The train slowed, a soft screech echoing through the empty carriages. The lights flickered, casting long, trembling shadows across the passengers. Ayaan's heart hammered in his chest. Ahead, the woman who never blinked stood silently, her eyes fixed on him. "This is your stop," she said, voice low and calm. "Either leave now or stay forever." Ayaan's breath caught. The doors ahead opened into darkness. A misty, empty platform stretching farther than he could see. He looked back at the train, the little girl humming her lullaby, the walls whispering, the reflections in the windows flickering like broken mirrors. Every instinct in him screamed, stay or run, life or endless night. He stepped forward, slowly at first, then with determination. Each step felt heavier, as if the air itself was trying to hold him back. The whispers turned into faint voices, begging, warning, pleading, but he forced himself onward. And then, he stepped off. Cold air hit his face, darkness, silence, and then lights. A street lamp flickered above him, revealing the familiar bus stop, the faint rustle of leaves in the night, the distant honk of a car, the faint hum of the city normal life. Ayaan blinked. His backpack was on the ground, his phone buzzed. He sat up, shivering, realizing he had dozed off while waiting for the bus. The midnight train, the strange passengers, the whispering walls, it had all been a near-death dream. His mind spinning in the thin line between life and something darker. He laughed shakily, relief and disbelief tangled together. But as he rubbed his eyes, he noticed something, a small, frozen clock lying beside his foot, its hands stuck at midnight, just like the one in the suitcase. A shiver ran down his spine. Maybe it wasn't just a dream. Maybe he had glimpsed something beyond, something waiting for the careless, the sleeping, the lost. Ayaan stood, clutching the clock, and took a deep breath. He had escaped, but some part of the midnight train, some fragment of that endless night, had followed him back, and in the distance, somewhere in the shadows, he thought he heard a faint lullaby.